So what are the right ways and conversely the wrong ways to implement network load balancers?
Oh, this is a fascinating question. I think the thing that a lot of people don't think about with network load balancers is there's a quasi-tight coupling between the load balancer and the application that is being load balanced. And if you don't spend your time at that section of the design, you're only going to run into problems from the front end side. So I think that's the biggest thing, is to make sure that your application supports load balancing, that the load balancers support the protocols and things like that. I think, again, going back to the geolocation space, you should diversify, and you should put load balancers in multiple locations and all things like that. If you're running a fairly small network, using things like VRRP and VIP and virtual IPs are great for being able to handle failover between boxes. As you start to get into larger networks, being able to do things like BGP Anycast become really important for that. I think the other question is people are like, ooh, we're going to put a load balancer in front of that, and it's going to magically make everything better. Is to sit down and think, do I actually need a load balancer? Does the architecture actually require one, and what am I gaining from it other than a potential management headache?
Yeah, I've definitely seen people put a load balancer in front of like two servers that were ECMP, meaning that they're basically round robin traffic anyway. I'm like, okay, but it didn't help. It can, I mean, you can do stuff like, it could be for SSL offloading. I've seen that too, which that is a valid use for it.
Yeah.
So what's one thing that you would, in this area, in this way, specifically looking at sort of the wrong way, what's that common mistake? And Chris, you just mentioned putting a load balancer in where it's not needed, right? Like you're just adding complexity and latency and perhaps another point of failure to the mix. Is there anything else that you would sort of recommend, or Charles as well, to highlight, to say, this, you see this happen a lot, but the expectation is X, but it's really delivering something completely different?
I have more than once seen a load balancer configured to deliver every request to every server. I don't understand why that was even a choice, but obviously all that does is increase the load on your pool instead of decrease the load. So don't ever do that. It has to be for testing, but I've definitely seen it in production. So yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, I think it's also I wouldn't necessarily call this the wrong way, but it definitely raises cost-benefit analysis questions about putting a load balancer in front of a single server. Is a major thing. I am going to step on my soapbox for a moment and basically be like, if you're using a load balancer to transition between public IP space and a private server, you should consider just putting that server on a public IP address. You're just dramatically increasing your complexity, and if you're increasing your complexity, you're also potentially decreasing your security posture, because it becomes harder to audit and it becomes harder to figure out what's going on.
That's a very good point. Thank you for sharing that.
Agreed, for sure.